Okay, it's 12:30 in the morning. I want to get this video done on Friday and out on Friday, so I'm recording now to get this shit done. Um, I think I'm gonna try and push for Wednesday uploads because I have my Tuesdays and my Wednesdays off. So those are the days that I can really work on a video and actually be able to push it out. So I'm going to try for Wednesday uploads from now on, I think. If I can make a shorter video, and get it up, I'll do that. If I can't, I can't. All right. This video is about immigration. Now, what do I mean by immigration? I mean mass immigration. I'm talking about immigration that you're seeing in the EU right now. Immigration that there's a good number of people want to have happen in the US. Specifically from predominantly Muslim countries. Now, why do I specify predominantly Muslim? It's because these are the areas that people seem to be all riled up about nowadays. So, we're going to have a little chit-chat about that. Now, there is a massive failure in the EU because of these things. You see riots all the time. You hear all these crime statistics being thrown out. You hear about the drain on society. You hear about their unemployment rates. I think it's like 83% unemployment from immigration, from Muslim immigrants in the EU. That's a ridiculously high number. You just hear about lack of integration. You hear about, just Muslims being so hateful to the native population. You hear about them raping. You see videos on Facebook where these immigrants are raping Swedish women. And then you have the terrorist attacks that are becoming a commonplace in the EU. And that's insane. That's insane to me. Why did you allow this to happen? Now, the reason that they allowed this to happen was a couple of different things. One, they felt like, we need these people. We need to be culturally enriched. We're all white people, so we need all these. We don't have culture. We're white people, and that's idiotic. Europe has a wonderful culture, a very vibrant culture, and you should celebrate that, not demonize it because you're all freaking white. Another reason was because baby boomers were starting to, leave the employment sector. Birth rates were down, and they needed people to step into the workforce. And they saw these refugees, and they're like, we could use this as a workforce. They can become citizens here. We have a great way of life. They'll love it. Didn't exactly work like that. What ended up happening is they came over and they became a massive drain on the economy and on their society. They didn't integrate. They're still not integrating. They create Muslim ghettos and gangs. They just are hostile towards European citizens. They're not in the workforce. They're massively unemployed. And it's just a problem. There's literal no-go zones in France and in Germany and in Sweden because the cops physically cannot get in there to help you. They just can't. Cities in Europe, you see armed military personnel patrolling because that's how dangerous it's become. That's a problem. People bitch about the US being a police state. I wanted to compare this to my experiences with refugees and immigrants here in Maine. Now, in Maine, we have a rather substantial Somali and Iraqi population in comparison to the total size of the state. We only have a population of about 1.3 million, and on top of that, we have about 17,000 Iraqi and Somali refugees living here. I can't find any numbers past 2010 in terms of unemployment rates. But what I can tell you is that by 2010, there was about a 53% unemployment rate and an additional 28% underemployment rate, which meant that they were working less than 20 hours a week. And they were completely living off the government. It was like 92% of them were on some form of government assistance, be it housing, food stamps, just welfare in general, or a combination of all three. So that was whenever the population was about 1,900. Now it's 17,000. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to go ahead and say that it's probably about the same as the EU in terms of employment rates. Now, the reason is because most of these people are uneducated completely. 85%. We can't tell how educated they are. We just can't. They might as well be completely uneducated. We don't know. And that's because these countries don't have schools, really. They don't have adequate schooling. They don't speak the language. They don't speak English. A lick of it. And that is a problem. You know, we don't have a national language, but it might as well be English. You know, it might as well be English. And that's a problem, especially for Maine, because everybody in Maine speaks English. English or French. It's because we're close to Canada. English or French, those are the languages. If you speak either of those, you're pretty set. If you don't speak either, you're fucked. Plain and simple. And I think it was like 2% had above a high school education. It was insanely small numbers of people that actually had an education. Now, the reason we brought these refugees into Maine in the first place was because of the same reason in the EU. Literally. And it panned out the same way as in the EU. Massive unemployment, living off of the state, living off of the local population and the government. You see Somalis go into a Walmart in Auburn or Lewiston, and they literally fill up 2 shopping carts full, overflowing with food. And they just go to the checkout and they swipe their little government assistance card. And then they get into their car that was provided to them by the government, with their driver's license that was provided to them by the government, without them having to take a driver's test. And then they go back to their government housing to go ahead and grab their government assistance checks. Yes, that's a fucking problem. We only have 1.3 million people in a mid-sized state. We don't have a very powerful and robust economy. It's fairly stable, but it's not really set up to handle this. We're not really set up to handle it. We're just not. This is the reality of the immigration that's happened in Maine. This is the reality of it. It's a drain. It's the same reality. It's happening in Europe, except in Europe, the population is actually rather substantial. So it became dangerous. So you have rape gangs. So you have violence. So you have all these problems. I'm not trying to exaggerate it. I'm not trying to say that if you go to Europe, you're going to get raped or murdered. That's just not the reality. However, the likelihood of you getting raped or murdered goes up in your proximity to the refugees, the migrants that are in these countries. It goes up exponentially in comparison with the native population. I think it was like 400,000 crimes committed by 1 million refugees in Germany. 40% of the population was committing some level of known crime. Unfortunately, in the U.S., we've began developing a welfare state and more socialized medical practices. I'm going to go into this in a lot further detail later down the line. I'm not really a fan of socialized medicine. I would rather have affordable health care. I am a fervent believer that if you have more money, yeah, you should be able to get better health care. That's just the reality of the situation. This incentivizes people to, go out, try to better themselves, try to make more money for themselves and future generations, blah, blah, blah. Again, I'll go into this into further detail later down the line. Now, you can't have a welfare state, socialized medicine, and mass immigration of largely uneducated populations. Because largely uneducated populations are going to be the ones that are going to be living off of the welfare state and off of the socialized medical structure. It's just the reality of the situation. You don't have to like it. It's not fair. It's not nice, but it's the reality of the world. You see that in every country. It's not the smart people. It's not the people that are able to go out and get the college educations and to provide more services to the country. No, it's the population that's not able to do that. We see this in the EU. Again, you have the refugees. They're living off the welfare system. They're demanding more from countries that took them in from war-torn sections of the world. They are actively demanding more. Better housing, more food, better food, food that they like, more money in general, just a plethora of different things. You see them overwhelming the local medical facilities and things like this with cases of exotic diseases that they just don't have an active cure for. That they actually have to go out and they have to try to cure it. Because they can't. They can't with the medicine that they currently have. And you see the immigrant populations go in and they start to harass the medical professionals, the nurses and the doctors that are trying to care for their child, and their child dies in their service because they just couldn't get the medicine in time, or they couldn't get the right sort of medicine. They couldn't figure out what was going on with the child in time. And then you see them getting violent with medical professionals because they don't have the ability to turn you down in a socialized system. They have to serve you. They have to, because they're paid for by the government. And that's a problem that I don't want to see replicated here in the States. Now, lastly, there is another elephant in the room, and that is the problem of Islam. Islam is very antithetical to the way that we live and the lives that we live in the Western nations. Now, in America, we are finally developing and have developed an American culture. One that we didn't have even 100 years ago, I would argue. I'm very happy that we're developing that American culture and we're solidifying it more. I'm very happy about that. I don't want another culture to come in here and try to change that. You know, we have a very young culture. And with these very aggressive people from these other nations, these very aggressive sorts of ideas and ideals, and just, it's very dangerous to a very young, nubile culture like we have in America. Because it's hard to see American culture sometimes. It's really hard for us to see it because we're so used to so many different things. We look at Maine, we see the culture in Maine, and then we look at even Massachusetts and we see the culture in Massachusetts, and there's differences. So we go, oh, well, I guess we don't have a culture. Everybody can have their own culture here, and blah, blah. But there's still core ideals and values that are there. Freedom, liberty, equality under the law. Things like this are very, very central to being American. These things are not exemplified within Islam. And we can't talk about it. Otherwise, we're racist. I've been called racist I don't know how many times for me saying Islam is a shit religion. I don't particularly care for Muslims. Now, there is a difference, I would say, between Islam in Islam that was developed from a Western mindset, someone in the Western world who became Islamic. I would say that there is a difference there between that and Islam in the Middle East. I'm more okay with that kind of Islam, so long as they're not pushing for Sharia law. Fuck you, Linda Sarsour. Why would we take Islam as it stands in the Middle East, which is dangerous, completely antithetical to the way that we live our lives, and oppressive to everybody who's in it, and bring that here? Why would we bring that here and say it's okay for them to have that? It's not. You need to draw the fucking line. That's where I'm drawing my line. That's where I'm drawing my line. Where are you going to draw yours? Europe is finally starting to draw its lines. Finally. It took them so long. And they are the canary in the coal mine. They are realizing they have to talk critically about Islam. That they can't be afraid to anger the Muslims. And if, talking critically of your religion causes you to want to murder people, I'm going to go ahead and say you're not a very good person. And I don't want you here. So yeah. I'm very much against the intake of refugees from the Middle East into our country, into America. For those reasons. Because they're dangerous. Because the idea of it is dangerous. Because they're a drain. Because they don't work. And because they live off the state. Because they're not coming here to live like Americans. They didn't go to Europe to live like European people. They didn't go to Germany to live like Germans or France to live like the French. They went there to live like they did back home and to change France and Germany. I'm learning from that lesson. And I hope you will too. But sometimes you do have to be aggressive with these things. And sometimes you do have to draw your line in the sand. You have to put your foot down and you have to be stubborn. And you have to hold to your ideals. Wow, that went really serious in the end there. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like what you saw, give the video a like, share it, and if you want to see more, please subscribe. I'm going to start making more and more regular content, and it's just going to keep improving as time goes on. So again, I want to thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you around.